Okay, so you want to know what all the fuss is about with Tucker Carlson right
And
now.
come to the right place.
We've been digging through a ton of articles, research, you name it.
We're talking a deep dive.
And let me tell you, Carlson doesn't shy away from much.
Nope.
We're talking American politics, media, you name it, even those really controversial social issues.
The stuff everyone's talking about, but maybe not always wanting to talk about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So to really get into this, I think we should start with like the big picture. Like, what are the themes that keep popping up on his show?
Yeah, from what we've seen, Carlson really focuses on this idea that a lot of people feel abandoned by the systems that are supposed to represent them.
You mean like the government?
Exactly. And the media. He gives a voice to the people who feel like their concerns are just being ignored.
Okay, so that's kind of the foundation. But let's get more specific. One thing we saw a lot of was his analysis of American politics. He seems to call out both parties, but he definitely spends a lot of time talking about what he sees as problems with left-leaning policies,
Right, and that ties into his whole idea of government overreach.
which a lot of people are talking about these days.
Yeah.
I mean, look at all the debate around things like vaccine mandates.
Exactly, or government surveillance programs. Carlson's really tapping into this fear that people have about losing their individual liberties.
And that the government is getting too powerful.
Right?
Another big theme we saw was censorship,
Oh, yeah.
especially how big tech companies are silencing certain voices.
This is huge for Carlson. He's constantly talking about how these social media giants are basically controlling what we see and hear.
And who gets to speak?
Exactly. It's like he sees it as this battle for free speech.
A David and Goliath situation.
Totally. And this connects to a really big debate happening right now about Section 230.
Which is?
It's this legal thing that basically protects online platforms from being held responsible for what people post on their sites.
Oh, right.
Carlson and a lot of others argue that this gives these companies too much power to censor anyone they disagree with.
Without any consequences.
Right.
And it's not just big tech. Carlson also goes after those big corporations and how they work with the government.
Yeah, he's done shows about the pharmaceutical industry and their influence on health policies.
He's talked about lobbyists, too.
Oh, yeah, how they basically shape legislation.
Yeah.
It all feeds into this idea that the average person is being manipulated by these powerful forces.
That the system is rigged.
Exactly.
Which honestly you hear from both sides of the political spectrum these days.
Definitely.
Think about the Occupy Wall Street movement or the Tea Party. It's this distrust of concentrated power.
Right.
And then there's how he tackles cultural issues.
Oh, boy.
He really gets into the hot button topics. Immigration, race relations. What he calls woke culture.
And this is where things can get really heated.
Yeah.
He's not afraid of controversy. But it's interesting how he frames these issues like it's all part of this bigger story about how American values are changing.
And not necessarily for the better, in his view.
Right. He's appealing to this sense that some people have that the country is losing its way.
Losing its identity.
Yeah.
Now it's not just domestic stuff. Carlson talks about international affairs, too.
U.S. foreign policy especially.
He's often pushing back against the idea of America getting involved in conflicts around the world.
Yeah, he advocates for a more hands-off approach. Less intervention.
Which is a whole other debate that's been going on forever.
Oh, yeah. Isolationism versus interventionism. It goes way back to the Founding Fathers.
So to see how this all plays out on his show, I think we should look at some specific examples.
Definitely.
He's done episodes about everything. Artificial intelligence, the Jonestown Massacre, the challenges conservatives face in Hollywood.
It's a really wide range of topics. And that's intentional.
How so?
It makes him seem like a thought leader who can speak to all sorts of concerns. Like he's got his finger on the pulse of what really matters.
And keeps things interesting.
Exactly.
And he's had some pretty big names on his show.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
You mentioned the Hollywood episode with Rob Schneider.
Right.
But there's also Matt Taibbi, who writes a lot about media bias.
And Dr. Peter McCullough, who's been pretty outspoken about COVID policies.
His choice of guests is interesting.
It's definitely strategic. He's bringing on people who support his views and who will resonate with his audience.
It's all about creating that sense of shared understanding. Like they're all in this together.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. But with anyone in the media, it's super important to be critical thinkers.
Oh, absolutely.
We have to ask ourselves, what evidence is Carlson using to support his arguments? Are there other perspectives out there?
Right. We need to be looking at information from different sources and evaluating how credible they are and recognizing that everyone has their own biases.
Including
Okay.
Carlson himself.
Of course.
So at the end of the day, Tucker Carlson's show is a place where he can talk about these controversial issues, challenge the mainstream narrative,
Get people talking.
And maybe even arguing.
and that leads to a really important question for you. How do you process all of this? How do you form your own opinions when there's so much information and so many different viewpoints out there?
It's not easy, but it's something we all have to grapple with.
Especially in this day and age.
For sure.
So keep thinking, keep questioning.
And most importantly, keep learning.
Exactly.